Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Things We Know. So, we wanted to spend some time today talking about storytelling because it's one of those things that is so woven into being human that we often don't pause to examine it. We tell stories constantly about our lives, about our family, about our work, and about who we think we are. And yet, we rarely talk about why storytelling matters so much or what it actually does for us.
Yeah, I love this. I'm a big fan. Storytelling is how we make meaning. It's not just how we, tell people about ourselves. It's
Right.
it's it's a lot more. It's how we organize experience and how we understand what we live through. It is definitely something you can get better at.
Mm,
Definitely. My kids are always really noticing who's a good storyteller, and
yeah.
I think when something happens and we don't have language for it, it can stay lodged in the body as confusion or tension. So it also like is really healing to tell stories.
Mm,
It helps us learn and grow and process in the real time, and
yeah.
especially if you're a verbal processor. Story gives shape to experience. It lets us say this happened, this mattered, and I'm still here.
Yeah, I'm definitely a verbal processor.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Is
And
that a
that's not,
surprise to our listeners?
yeah, yeah. As we literally process things weekly.
Yeah.
That's why storytelling shows up everywhere, across cultures, across time. It's not ornamental or indulgent. It's actually functional. It helps us sort of center, orient ourselves in the world and inside our own lives.
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm just throwing something at my dog. It's a pillow. I'm not a meanie. Trying to get her to leave my other dog alone. Excuse me. Storytelling isn't reserved for like writers and performers either. I mean, I love that good writers and good performers do this, like, whether they're songwriters or actors or orators, but like really it's just something humans do instinctively. Every time we reflect, we remember or try to explain ourselves to another person, we get to shape a narrative about who we are and what we believe, like
Mm,
and really, you know, claim ourselves, right? And when I say shape a narrative, I don't mean make it up. I mean
right.
like really speak for yourself.
Mm, yeah.
And
And also like have a memory.
right, right. It's like have a stamp on history or at least with that person that you're who's
Yeah.
listening. I would say historically, storytelling has been central to how cultures preserved knowledge long before written records were possible. Um, in indigenous communities that I'm aware of, especially obviously including Native and First Nation cultures, oral tradition is what carried history, often with women, but male leaders and elders. Land knowledge were included, values, lineage. So while storytelling roles were often shared across genders, women frequently held the responsibility for transmitting family histories, kinship ties, cultural memory within households and communities. And I've always loved that. And I always wonder, like, you know, why we aren't as aware of that, why we don't see it as much in Western cultures as we do in other like Native, Indigenous, and Eastern cultures.
Totally. And I think about the idea of like it makes me think of Good to Go. This is a weird
Mm-hmm.
loop back, but Amy Pickard's project or business Good to Go, because what I always loved about that project was the parts where you get to write out what you were like in your teens, in your 20s, in your 30s for the person who gets it to read, after you've passed away. And I do think something about our culture, we're so centered on ourselves. So we don't think about who our parents were before we were born,
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. And I think, and you miss a lot, right? In African society, storytelling traditions were communal and layered. Griots are often named as historian and oral record keepers, but women also played essential roles as storytellers, singers, and custodians of generational memory, particularly around birth, death, ritual, and moral teaching. And maybe that's one of the reasons I mean, think about it. That's so interesting that Amy included that in the Good to Go packet. These
Good.
stories preserve our lived experience in a way Formal histories often do not, and quite
Yeah.
frankly, right now we're seeing formal histories being erased.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
going to get into that for sure.
Okay.
Um and I think that's what inspired us for this
Yeah.
topic, honestly. But
Yeah.
this is such a rich topic. And do you remember that I got my mom and my mother-in-law story worth? Is that what it was called? Why am I totally forgetting it already?
I know what you're talking about from NPR. Story.
Well, yeah, yeah,
Was it
yeah. It
that
was
thing?
yes. And what I loved about it, my mom is such a good writer, and I loved what I loved about it is since I was the one who gifted it, it would automatically copy me on anything she submitted, and I'd read
Oh,
her
that's
stories and
cool.
just like, oh my gosh. And so this is a reminder to me in real time. Like I got to get her to complete that. My mother-in-law started a year later and like totally completed it, downloaded photos and like or uploaded photos and like sent it off and gave that gift to all of her kids. Like so
Oh,
they
that's
have a
cool.
bound book of like the story of her history from when she was very little and all her memories. And and like things she thought about, music she liked, first trips she took, like all of that. And it really is so like such a gift for everyone to get context of their ancestors and their grandparents and their elders. I loved it.
Yeah.
um yeah, I'm trying to remember where we were, sorry.
Oh, we're gonna move into Celtic
Oh,
traditions.
that's right. Thank you. I do. Yeah. Well, this is good because the Irish ancestry is big in my family. But in Celtic traditions, women served as bards, seers, oral historians, and alongside men, right? Like both men and women, I think, shared that. Storytelling was woven into spirituality, seasonal ritual, and daily life. So across cultures, women were not always the only storytellers, but they were often the keepers of relational and embodied history.
Mm,
They remembered what it was like to live through events, not just that they happened, but like
mm.
they're probably the ones that were with the children and who remember the details and the illnesses and the like what was happening with the rations and the meals and like the culture that
Yeah,
was being shared. I love that. And what I remember about so much of the records being kept in the Bibles in the churches in Ireland was there was a lot of records of the people keeping those notes were moms and grandmothers.
sure. Yeah, and this is important because when history becomes something that's written and institutionalized, lived experience often gets lost. These personal stories, they may not look official, but they are actually how truth is carried across generations. So
Mhm.
when we talk about storytelling, we also have to talk about power. Who gets to tell those stories? Whose stories are considered legitimate? And that shapes how we understand the world.
Hmm. There was a TED talk that I needed to go back to when I was thinking about this topic. I'm going to butcher the name. I'm going to try not to. Chimamanda. Okay, Chimamanda. Chimamanda. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I think that's how you say it. We will link to it. Okay. In this TED talk, it was like really about the danger of a single story, right? And she explains how incomplete narratives don't just limit understanding; they
Mm.
actively shape assumptions about people and cultures. And this is, I think, one of the reasons we wanted to get at this topic is there needs to be comparative storytelling to put together some sort of real picture of what was going on.
Absolutely. And when only one version of a story is told, especially by those in power, complexity disappears. Sometimes truth disappears. Again, on a personal level, many women internalize narrow stories about who they're allowed to be, right? They're a caregiver or a supporter or the strong one or the one who doesn't need much. So these stories can really, when it's internalized like that, ugh, it can become a limiting belief.
Yeah, I think yeah. So reclaiming storytelling, and we're seeing this right now. Like we're actively different cultures, minority cultures and women in this country right now are doing the best they can in real time, reminding each other to reclaim storytelling because it's a way of not just widening narrative, but keeping an accurate record for legal reasons, but also for history and, and longevity. It allows complexity instead of caricature,
Yeah.
instead of, some controlled bias propaganda, truth instead of simplification. And it matters so much, not just culturally, but personally for like people's mental health to just know,
Mm,
like, did I imagine that? Or is that really true? Is like this story being told that's so negative about me and my people true?
right.
Right.
Yeah, and there's an important distinction to make. Storytelling and narrative are not the same thing. We often use those words interchangeably, but they actually really function very differently.
Yeah. I mean, storytelling is rooted in lived experience. It's layered, it's imperfect, and it's often unresolved. And yeah, like definitely there can be nuances that make a great, you know, impact, but like the idea is that it's a person's account, whereas controlled narrative, on the other hand, tends to simplify. It selects what's convenient, what's palatable, what serves a particular purpose sometimes, right? Like it's like, here's how I want you to think about this.
Yeah, and that's really where motivation matters. Whenever a story is being told, it's worth asking who's telling it, why are they telling it, and what do they benefit if that version is accepted as the truth.
Yeah, narratives, controlled ones, especially, like, depending on who's telling it, it's often designed to protect power, preserve comfort, or avoid accountability. They smooth out the edges, they erase contradiction. Over time, they can distort reality so thoroughly that lived experiences start to feel invalid or invisible. Again, so this goes back to like, you listen to a person's experience, you're going to learn so much more about that time and that culture that they come from, even if it's just their experience, than you are going to be about like a washed over version of here's what we want you to know. And
Right.
I think that's
Reading
like
a
that
history
goes into
book.
like we talked about media literacy. When you're
Hmm.
learning about a culture from one writer, you got to ask yourself, what do they want me to feel when I read this?
Yeah. And so awareness becomes essential. Not cynical awareness, but conscious awareness. Because again, when stories are reduced or sanitized, entire communities can lose their history. And what's missing doesn't just fade away, it gets replaced.
That's why storytelling isn't neutral, choosing to tell the fuller story, especially when it's uncomfortable, is an act of integrity, whether it's with yourself or, who you're telling the story about. It's a way of saying this happened, this mattered, and it deserves to be remembered accurately with details, right? With like personal perspectives.
Yeah, and this isn't just about the big cultural narratives. It happens in families, institutions, and communities too. Whose version gets to become the official one? Whose memory is dismissed as
Mm,
emotional or unreliable or hysterical?
mm.
Uh,
This is really hitting home in a lot of ways. Um, which is God, I could stop on every one of these and go in a different direction. I want to say like it's why documenting stories matter, writing them down, recording them, saying them out loud, not only helps eventually in the court of law or in the court of public opinion, but it really helps like your own personal story. Like you keep a journal really well. It's so cool to go back and remember something rather than remember a distorted version of it for how you're feeling, right?
yeah.
I think like when stories are preserved in their complexity, they become harder to erase or rewrite.
It's interesting because I was talking to Darren after January 6th of 2026 and when the history was literally being erased and whitewashed. And he made the comment, I hope I'm saying this correctly, like the having the January 6th committee, that's why that was so important because anybody can go onto whitehouse.gov like Wikipedia and decide to change the narrative, decide to say that they were patriots and the Capitol Police were Antifa and all the bullshit that came out. And so being able to have that kind of documented thing is even though that wasn't necessarily having these committees or having even Jack Smith be public versus private, it does become a form of preservation. Not not to argue, but to remember. to
Right.
understand, things can it can be presented however the person in power wants it to be presented. But when you have like legitimate legal documents that and you
Testimony.
testimony, thank you. That's exactly right. It's you get to bear witness. I mean, I again, we're recording this early. I spent some time this morning watching the Jack Smith testimony live, and I got to see once again how one side of the aisle decides to make everything look versus the other side of the aisle. It's very important to bear witness to those sorts of things.
For sure. I mean, a great example of this is, like you just said, if you go to some official websites, you're going to hear that it was great patriots and that it was, that there was people who were just so committed to freedom and to truth. If you listen to individual stories, for
Yeah.
instance, Michael Fanone, right? That policeman who was beaten into, like, I think he was unconscious and he had a heart attack.
He had
And
a Dropkick Murphys shirt on today,
I
BT Dubs.
I
I was
heard,
like,
I love
okay,
that.
I see you.
I love those guys.
I know.
They're like, they almost deserve a whole episode, the way they like also are so good at like conversing with people who,
Yeah,
anyway, who believe differently than them. But anyway, back to him. Like, you hear just his story. Does that tell everyone's story that day? No, but it is such an accurate depiction from like the perspective of a law enforcement officer, which is,
right.
really important, of what that experience was. One is like, one tells one person's perspective more accurately than some sort of description of it from, a motivated person who controls a certain narrative, right?
Yep.
Person or organization. So I think that that's just one of the greatest examples. But then I go, like, earlier in this section that we were talking about this, I was thinking, like, yeah, two different siblings have very different stories to tell because of birth
Totally.
order, because of relationship, because of just nature versus nurture. They're in the same family. They may talk about the exact same event in a very different way. And so that's why storytelling is so important, because your story is just as important as your sister's or your brother's. And it doesn't make you wrong or them wrong. It's like your story, right? And that's
Absolutely.
very different than what someone might say about a family's history. Each of your stories has their own validity. And it probably sounds like I'm getting in the weeds of like what's true. And I'm really not trying to. I just think everyone's story is their truth.
Well, it's like pieces of a puzzle, right? Like you can, yes, you can stand outside. Like I wouldn't do this, but like I could stand outside of your family and be like, oh, well, what I know of Carrie and Brendan and Peter, and
Mm-hmm.
But as each of you have your story, it becomes the tapestry, right?
Right. Right.
So
I
it's
mean,
it
like,
everything is interwoven and valid.
right. And someone could look at us and really assume, so they could tell a very sad story about stuff our family's been through, and they
Right.
wouldn't tell the joyful stories or like the trauma stories in the right way. You know what I mean?
Right.
Each of one of us has a different story around it.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, just bearing witness, um, it isn't passive, it's a responsibility, right? Like, to yourself and to,
Mm.
people who can gain something to learn from it. But it's just, I think it's just so important to know, if you have the ability to like record things, it's going to help you. And it really could help others with perspective if you can bear witness and use your platform to speak, even if your platform is just, you know, talking to one other person.
Totally. Yeah.
I think there's strong research that shows that storytelling isn't just expressive, but therapeutic. I think in narrative psychology, which I mean, my one of my best friends just just got her master's in narrative medicine, and how important
Oh.
it is now to, like, storytelling has been in medicine for, not just research, but um, looking at patterns, right?
Hmm.
So narrative psychology and trauma research, we see that when experiences remain fragmented or unspoken, they can actually stay stuck in the nervous system. Storytelling helps integrate those experiences into a coherent whole. So there's a lot of different therapies besides talk therapy where they're noticing that, like EMDR is one, where you
Mm,
focus on certain triggering words that you can work on desensitizing so you can like move past where how they're stuck for you and how they're constantly causing you suffering. So I love that because the opportunity, like we see it when we're coaching someone,
hmm.
when we can actually get them talking about their beliefs and maybe the earliest moments they can remember associating with them, it's like something really frees up there in their energy
Yeah.
in their body.
Yeah. I mean, just sometimes the act of saying it out loud and hearing yourself say something, right? So, that's why practices like narrative therapy or journaling and reflective dialogue are so powerful. It's not that they erase the pain, but they change our relationship to it. The story, I don't know, it becomes something we can hold rather than something that holds us sort of hostage with our limiting beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, I love this. Healing, it it doesn't require a resolution. Sometimes there is no resolution. It requires honesty.
Mm.
Being able to say this happened and it shaped me and I'm still here, I'm still working on this, I'm still, growing, I think is so powerful.
Yeah, and again, the healing doesn't come from fixing, but from being witnessed. Uh, you know, I remember, I don't know if you did this. I did it with Melissa, but I learned from Elijah that Mama Gina, is that her name?
Yeah.
Mama? Yeah. And there was there's a certain set of questions where you bear witness to somebody. And it really is just like you get on with the client. In this case, it was just my friend. And you say nothing. You just keep asking a question so that they get to unfold and unfold and unfold. And that time of being heard without interruption or minimization or coaching just allows the nervous system to settle and meaning to emerge. I have a client, I talked about her in the last episode that we just recorded. She's coming to the retreat, and I love her because she will say to me, she'll say, I just want to tell you these things. I don't want to be coached. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'll just bear witness. That's fine. And then if I have something to say, I ask for permission. But really, she just knows when she just has to say it out loud instead of having it rolling around in her head, right?
Oh, for sure.
It allows her nervous system, anyone, as you're having these conversations, to be able to bear witness. The person that you're is being witnessed, it allows their nervous system to settle and actual meaning to emerge.
It's hitting me right now listening to you. It's because we did something like this at our last retreat too, where we really encouraged them not to interrupt, just to
Yes.
listen quietly. And everyone talked about how hard that was. And even though
Hmm.
it's super important that as coaches and as friends and witnesses that we also when the time is right in that conversation to help with reframing,
Hmm.
so important to resist reframing somebody's like changing someone's story. Right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
we're so quick to want to be like, but like I mean, if I didn't have the training I have, I could see myself as a mom or a wife or a friend doing that. Like, but you didn't mean that. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
or like,
Totally.
let me like soften this, like the way you're looking at yourself around this, and really just listening and letting people kind of heal and move through it. They'll get there. They'll get to a much more real place with it without without you trying to plug the leak happening with their guilt, right?
Totally.
Or with their judgment. It's like just listening and witnessing and not reacting and letting them feel okay for whatever they're sharing is that's the work, not what you say.
100%. And that's how and why storytelling plays such a huge role in identity. Because these stories that we tell about ourselves shape what we believe is possible. If your story only includes responsibility or survival, it can be hard to imagine expansion or joy. And so just letting someone talk, again, you and I know this from being coaches, just letting them almost, we joke about like, well, you coached yourself on that one, right? Like
Mm.
letting them come full circle, letting them go, oh,
Yeah.
and I love when a client reframes for themselves because that's going to mean a hell of a lot more when they've embodied that and come up with it for themselves versus me telling them, well, you could look at it this way. Nothing better than when somebody coaches themselves.
I
Ah,
have a
love it.
client who will like start to do something, go, yeah, I heard it.
Oh, it's the best though. It's
Yeah.
the best.
And also it's just if I'm listening to this right now and I'm wondering, like, if someone's listening to this, what were they hoping we were going to be like, here's how you tell a good story?
Right, right.
There's some great books out there. There's one produced by The Moth, right? Like that
Mm.
helps people with really good storytelling, captivating storytelling. I think it's super important to know that a really good story doesn't need a finished arc. It doesn't need a punchline, right?
Mm.
It's just like some of the most honest storytelling happens in the middle. Like, here's where I am, and like, who knows what happens next, but here's what I've learned so far. And this is actually what
Right.
I realized. And here's where I pivot for what's next. I think in the I don't know yet, being in the beginning or the middle is also a really good time to start telling a story because it kind of helps you shape what's next. I love a good story with an ending, honestly, but I do think it's so powerful to know that you can like create you can not create like you can form the words for a story, in the beginning and the middle too.
Yeah, it's like to be continued.
Yeah.
Dot dot dot. Yeah, I mean, and that's really deeply aligned with the heroine's journey, right? Unlike the hero's journey, which is often about conquest and resolution, the heroine's journey is softer. It's about integration. It's about reclaiming your voice, yourself, and acknowledging the wisdom through lived experience.
I love this about just all of our best chapter yet retreats. It's always been our metaphor, like writing a
Yeah.
new chapter and like where are you on the threshold and like what's the next journey, right? Writing your story isn't about editing the past, right? It's about honoring it, learning from it, and choosing how you want to live and move forward.
Yeah, we'll be again, we don't know when this is landing, but we'll be interviewing Megan Dirks and her whole series Girl on the Left, which is all about acknowledging the girl on the left, the before picture, quote unquote, and how she is part of this, right? So this again, this isn't about editing the past or even wanting to let go of the past. It's about integrating that girl on the left into who you are now.
I also want to just, refer back and shout out Jenny Nesbitt because
Yeah.
like that as a trained coach and as somebody who does the Akashic records and like her helping people write their memoir, what an incredible journey that is.
Yeah.
And one metaphor I keep returning to and then thinking about that, right? The like cathartic experience of writing a memoir is just the idea of story as a tapestry. Each
Yeah.
experience is a thread. Some are bright, some are dark, some are tangled and frayed, some need repair.
And when you're living inside of it, you only see this like small section at a time. When you get to do the storytelling, it lets you step back and see how all those threads relate. Not to judge
Mm.
them, but just to understand the pattern.
Yeah. And healing doesn't mean removing like the frayed parts, right? It means recognizing that they're all part of it. It's part of the whole, the tapestry is stronger because of them. Even the parts like where it's a little bit a little bit altered.
Yeah, I mean, stories just, it doesn't just heal individuals, it heals community. When one woman tells the truth about her life, it often opens up the door for others to do the same.
I like that. And also I was thinking there's one other TED talk on the power of storytelling that I was looking for. And if I remember
Mm,
correctly, the guy's name is Jeff Gothelf. I think that's it. He talks about how stories move people from information into meaning.
mm,
So facts inform us, but stories are what actually change how we see ourselves and each other. And if you recall, one of the like I never remember which one it is, but I think it's a version of both. There's these two guys that Carrie and Stacey used to hire to like talk to
yeah,
us about
Pat
how to
Quinn.
speak. Yeah,
Hmm.
Pat Quinn and then like Pete was another one, Pete and Pat.
Yes. Yep.
And really, story is a way to like help people really visualize, like step into the experience you're trying to help them with, right? Like
Yep.
obviously there is a sales bit of it there, but it's coming from an authentic place. Tell a story that people can relate to, so
Mm.
that they can visualize like how they might feel, and that's like where you're going to connect more. And I've always loved that, right? Like it really like you could just you could share some facts about what you do, but if you can like help them walk through how it relates to them, so much more powerful.
Totally. Although I also just have to say, we always were like, could you maybe get a woman up there?
Exactly. Because every single time I'm like, they're great. Can we do a woman next time?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They were great, and they taught. I learned a lot about, particularly storytelling in a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I so that part of it was fantastic, but I don't know. Yeah, it discounts a big piece. I mean, the thing is, stories do create empathy. They reduce isolation, and they normalize our struggles. They remind us that they're human experiences, not personal failures.
Okay, so this is where I also want to add, like when we're recording this, God, I hope whenever this comes out, we can say remember when, and it isn't worse or it isn't this still going or it isn't all over the place. But at the moment, there is like there what I'm thinking about as we're doing this in real time is storytelling versus gaslighting, right?
Yeah.
At the moment, the amount of stories, individual stories coming out of Minneapolis alone of people who are just being terrorized by ICE,
Hmm.
terrorized by what's happening there. These individual stories really do not just create empathy, but they help people feel like they're not suffering alone. They help people know they're not crazy. They saw it too. That like is they come with a lot of, yeah, this is hard to watch, but like if you could imagine yourself and and this is stirring something in you, what can you say to help like change this story, how it's going, right? Like what do we need to do in reaction to this to say like this isn't okay? So it's like storytelling in terms of what's happening in real time and social justice and versus gaslighting versus a narrative that some news outlets aren't covering or like really seeing it in a different way, like the storytelling that's being done from videotaping of that horrific shooting versus the storytelling of someone trying to feel bad for the shooter, right? Like is just fascinating. If and that's the nicest way I can say it. It's fascinating to see how like two very different versions of the same event are meant to either manipulate or explain or justify. It's fascinating. So I just want to say, in terms of what we want into this to talk about, like where it can be healing is where stories match up, or where stories like help people understand that they didn't imagine it.
It's interesting too, because I think we're in this interesting moment in time. Like I did see somebody say, can you imagine what the civil rights movement would have been like had we had phones? Had we been able to record, the things that happened at Selma,
Mm-hmm.
and we are in this interesting era of storytellers, right? The Jess Cravens, even Christie at BuildTomorrow.chai, right? Like the documentation of what is happening, boots on the ground. When ICE first came into LA and Trump sent um, the National Guard in, and I did a post about, look, I live downtown. I am not seeing any of the shit you all are seeing on legacy media. The amount of white men who came into my Instagram, I was like, that's because Trump saved all that. It's like, do you fucking live here? Do you live in LA? Because if you don't live in downtown LA, shut the fuck up. And it was really important to me and I know it is for you, and obviously it is for Christy. And I think we're in this interesting era of legacy. I'm going to say legacy media people who are leaving, whether it's Joy Reid or the white guy that got fired from ABC after he questioned. I can't think his name, but there's
Harry Moran.
Terry Moran, right? Like they are now freed from the what is imposed upon them at networks to actually be telling Jacob Soboroff. Like
Mm-hmm.
he is an amazing. I mean, I know he's still with MS now, but like I was watching a clip of him the other night talking about the LA fires, and of course he grew up in the Palisades, so he lost his family home. Like it's really important to be amplifying those voices right now because we're
Yeah.
not getting what we need from a storytelling perspective. They don't have time, they don't have the resources, they want to kowtow to the
Mm-hmm.
the White House. It's really important to be paying attention to these essentially people right now.
Right. And I'm glad I'm glad we went there with journalists because they are the storytellers. If you look over time, if you had just heard facts about horrific things, genocides and wars and things like that, you wouldn't be as compelled by what you're seeing in real time now without those stories, without those images, without like, it's
Yeah.
like individual stories. Do I know every story? No. But like if you've read enough books or seen enough movies or heard enough accounts of what one family went through,
Right.
like whether it was in the Holocaust or in any other genocide really, like, and there's been many, and like any horrific thing from history, you're a lot more aware now. And I think that's what it's about. Like every story told helps people excuse me, relate
Bless you.
and not feel gaslit by narratives.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, we're still being gaslit, but yes, you recognize that you're being gaslit because you're seeing these.
Resisting. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm having like a sneeze attack. Hold on.
Okay. So we are going to use a song this time that literally feels like a living example of everything we've been talking about, which is Fast Car by Tracy Chapman. It is really a master class in storytelling.
Yeah, and I guess what I love about it is maybe it like doesn't tell about everything, but it's such a great example of when you tell a story how you're learning about yourself in real time.
Absolutely. It's reflective and grounded. It teaches through lived experience rather than explanation.
Go ahead.
You want me to? Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Afraid you're going to sneeze again?
yeah.
Okay. Right. So, so I remember when we were driving in your car, speed so fast, felt like I was drunk. City lights lay out before us, and your arm felt nice wrapped around my shoulder. And I had a feeling that I belonged. I had a feeling that I could be someone. Such a good song. I love that it resurfaced a couple of years ago when the country song guy sang it or covered it, and then
Yeah.
she came onto the Grammys and sang it with him.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
It's funny how people, like criticized that. And I thought, God, you didn't watch it then because if
Right.
you knew his story, I cannot think of his name. I'm sorry. But
Yeah,
Luke
no clue.
Combs, maybe Luke Combs.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Um, if you heard anything about the story, which obviously I don't know a ton, but I learned enough to know it was like his favorite song, worshipped
Mhm.
her. Like, and you could see on his face just the adoration and like the thrill of being there with her. And I thought it was just, God, she was just so majestic in that moment. It was
Yeah.
really cool.
And I just love
Um,
it. Again, it goes back to how it is a masterclass in storytelling, right? That it would, because what that was probably 30 years old,
yeah,
25
something.
years old when he covered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the power of this song is that it doesn't tell us what to think. It lets us just literally sit inside that car in that moment. The hope, the love, the longing, the realism, it all coexists. And that's storytelling. That's where real life lives.
Yeah, that's what good storytelling does. It doesn't preach. It teaches without preaching. It just gives you an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. So if you're listening and you feel pulled to tell your story in some ways, we want to honor that. There's no right format, there's no timeline. Some people just sit and do automatic writing and don't worry about grammar and punctuation and all those things. It's important,
Mm, so true. And your story doesn't need to be exceptional or worthy, whatever that means, right? Like
right?
it just needs to be yours. And
Yeah.
yeah, like the amount of times, how many times have we
Mm,
as coaches heard people be like, I don't have an exciting story. I don't have a
right.
compelling story. I don't have like a really sad, hard thing I've been overcome. And we're like, "Well, give us 5 minutes. We'll go, we'll pull it out of you."
Totally. But again, it doesn't have to be overly dramatic. It just has to be yours, as you said. Like storytelling is how we remember who we are, where we've come from, and how to make meaning of, again, where we've come but from, but also where we're going.
Yeah. So that's exactly what it is. It's instructing how we want to live in our next chapter.
Mm. I'm just gonna say, if you're listening to this and you think you have a story you'd like to share, reach out to us. We would love to amplify that. We often pick our friends who we know have great stories. We get pitched by companies and women who listen to a pod and go, "Ooh, I think my story would fit on this." If you're listening and you have a story to tell, we would be happy to hear it. Send us an email at the things we know podcast 23 at gmail.com. Um, and it requires a little bravery, but you could be on the pod with us. That'd be super fun.
Oh, that'd be so cool. I love it.
Well, I guess I'll end as always by saying thanks for listening and share this with anybody you know who may be struggling with their own story or feeling unworthy. And as always, we'll be back next week. Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.
Bye.